Hi. Hey,
All
Elliot.
right.
How you doing, man?
Doing great. Thank you, Tim, for having me.
Yeah. Super cool. So, this is Elliot Dinetz, and you're a doctor. And what I understand, and well, let's say how we met. We met in Miami during a Wim Hof method weekend, and we had like an instant click, you know. And the funny thing is, what I notice often when I make a video on YouTube, which is about the science and the physiology of breathing or cold training, I get responses like, "Are you a doctor? If not, you cannot talk about this." You know, and what I notice with you is that we could make hours of videos because we're so much on the same page, you know, and I would like you to explain what you do, like in more detail. What I understand, you're more like a holistic doctor, and I understand what you do, and how you treat people, and that it works amazingly. But in this video, I would like to, this is just the introduction. I would like to focus on detoxing, and if we know how to detox, you don't really have to worry about the retox that we do anyway. Either consciously by drinking a beer or by eating a sandwich cheese or whatever your retox is, but also unconsciously because we breathe in air that could be cleaner, or there's waste in the ground that is in the stuff that we eat. But first, about you, can you tell me a little bit, like, how do you call yourself, and how would you treat people that come inside with a problem?
For sure. How do I call myself? I am a board certified primary care physician here in the States, particularly with my own private practice in Miami, as I'm a certified specialist in functional and integrative medicine. And this is the leading edge approach to personalized health and wellness based on advanced biomarkers and your genes to see what's personally right for each unique individual. So we look at the entire person in a systems-based approach rather than a symptom-based approach, which you would see in conventional care. Having done that for a while, it doesn't take much time to know that that's not really successful. As you and me, Tim, have joked before, it's symptom control, and it's actually termed right to our faces in public, managed care. People should think about that and be like, that's not what I want. We want curative or preventive care.
Totally.
Which is more focused on this perspective.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my intro and what we do here. And we look at patients who've often seen several other clinics, big name ones I will not mention as well, who don't look at the entire picture, who don't take an advanced enough look to see or listen to the patient to get clues as to where their conditions or issues are struggling from.
Yeah. So say I would come to you and I would say, "Dr. Elliot, I feel depressed." Wait, if I would go to a conventional doctor, especially in the States, it would be like, "You feel depressed? Here's your recipe." And what would you get? For example, some antidepressant medicine. And that's like symptom control, right? So if I would get into your office, what would you do with me?
Well, listen, they exist for a reason. They're trying to help people. I just don't think and it's not just me. There are colleges behind me that have trained advanced practice doctors to know better. There are better ways. So if somebody's on that, we never remove them. You have to wean somebody off in the first place. But we try to get to the root cause of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's stress, which you're an expert in at helping people with.
I'm an expert in stress. I stress out all the time.
At least stressing the autonomic nervous system, right? You know how upregulated that can be, and a lot of that leads to cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and that can degrade memory, cause concentration issues, and is associated with mood disorders. So we look to see if that's a problem. We can use other tactics, supplements, lifestyle management, etc., to help with that. Secondly, something that's like beyond my understanding is how we don't understand that when women particularly get older, their hormones decline much more rapidly than men. And, having progesterone deficiency is associated with certain mood issues, anxiety, for example, some fears. And instead of throwing medications at them, treating the underlying problem by giving them what they lack might be a little bit of a better solution, because it helps medically as well. Hormone optimization helps in bone density, cardiovascular health, brain health. So these are all, looking at the root cause of the problem. Other things can be, the gut-brain connection many people have heard of already. That serotonin and dopamine are actually created in the gastrointestinal tract crits. So the more damage that is from a poor lifestyle or stress, a lot of things that affect our gastrointestinal system can cause some major harm there. So if we look there and we can sort of help the patients by giving them what they need, sometimes they don't really, and a lot of times that is actually targeting that cause. They don't need to be on those medications.
Yeah. And you just wrote this article for Psychology Today, it's called. It's pretty prestigious. So I read it. It's really cool. And there you write about that. Well, maybe you explain better. Like, can you explain what that article is about?
Sure. It was just addressing to the public, to the masses, what a lot of people weren't that aware of before, which is that how our environment, the environmental toxins that we all know are out there, but we don't give two thoughts to during the day, are making us ill, but don't have to. And that's based on knowing, a lot of these toxic exposures we have, mercury, we know from fish, from exhaust fumes also, right? Yeah. From metal fillings in the mouth, people don't realize. And even dentists I talk to know if you've brushed so many times over that area, you're releasing that metal. And there's other, and that's the thing is like you see joggers who are in the best health, but if they're jogging around highways and they're overexpanding that breathing potential, they're inhaling those toxic fumes and can get, pretty toxic. So there are definitely ways in which you can kind of guide people to changing certain things and doing something called testing, not guessing, and seeing if that problem actually is something far deeper than let's just say you're experiencing these toxins and the doctors can't figure out what it is because they're doing basic labs, right? In conventional insurance-based medicine. Yeah. Well, then they say nothing's wrong with you. And they say that a lot these days, which is the scary part. And if you could just go a little deeper, you can actually see ways to find out if it's these metals or pollutants. So by incorporating detox, which I think we'll talk a bit about, is how you can help control those environmental toxins on your body.
So detoxing you can do in, so let's say there's mercury. Do you have another two, like your top 3 toxins that are in our food or in the air or whatever? So mercury.
Sure, I can stick to just metals, but there's plastics, pesticides, and the list goes on. But with metals alone, there's arsenic, which is found in New Hampshire to cause, or strongly linked, we'll say, to gestational diabetes in women who are drinking the well water up there. There's, that's arsenic, okay, and you could find that in pesticides, well waters, even in India, it's a big problem, or South Asia rather. There's the cadmium, which is found in like metal plating, cheap jewelry, cigarettes, in several other areas. Cadmium is a kidney toxin. So it's something definitely not to miss if somebody has out of the blue kidney problems. And
how would you how can you say we have these 3 toxins and how could you get rid of them?
Well, actually, it's part of conventional medicine. I just don't know why it's not evaluated that much. And I think that's because, like my article points out, there are limitations to doctors practicing well. They're reimbursing less. They're stealing money, the hospitals and insurance companies, from doctors. I mean, really, it's no short of that. The suicide rate is going up in doctors. It's terrible. So their kind of incentive is to speed up. And then we get sued. Doctors get sued. It's just absolutely atrocious. But that's the reality of practicing medicine in America. And before I go any further, I want to support that with data and evidence so people realize how serious it is.
Please.
If you look, and I might even have it up here, at the World Health Organization, as well as several other institutes who've evaluated the mortality rates or deaths in developed leading edge countries, including yours. We're talking about Japan, Germany, Italy, okay, the leading first world countries in health. America spends more than almost all of them, possibly combined, and has the lowest health outcomes in terms of mortality. At least as of last year, the rates of death, or how long you live, have gone down. That's the start of a very scary trend.
So this is because of the use of too much medicine, you're saying? Or
that's a great question. And all I can tell you is that if we're spending this much and our outcomes are this crappy, let me finish. The other outcomes are that people today in America die from more preventable causes than anywhere else. And I think that's because of the lack of the use of integrative medicine, using, you know, a comprehensive approach, as you were talking about, you know, nutrition, wellness, prevention. It just doesn't happen. There's no incentive for it. So that's shocking. And yes, too much medicine is a known cause of complications to health. This is fact. You can type it in Google. So it's multifactorial, like everything. It's
always
simple as saying A plus B equals C.
Yeah.
It could be A plus B through Z, right? And you have to look at all important factors by listening to a patient, doing more in-depth analysis, and seeing what's in front of you. You know, a one-size-fits-all medicine, we know clearly does not work.
Well, I believe that it definitely works. It's my colleague on the stock market. He says, like, you know, you're like against medicine use, but because of this thinners, he had a heart attack when he was 45. Can you imagine, stock market boy? Because of these blood thinners, I'm still alive. And I had to acknowledge that, yeah, that's true. So instead of being against, and I'm never against, it's more like, we
Because you're against
10% of the use of medicine we do today. That's what I like to strive for, basically.
Yeah. So he said that you're against that because he was saved by. So we're talking about apples and oranges with that. We're talking about medicine. If we didn't have emergency medicine, people would die on the streets.
Of course. Yeah.
We have surgery that can save people's lives. But medicine occupies 90%, something outrageous, of what people from a day-to-day perspective need. And the way that that's being managed isn't me talking. That's the evidence. That we have more suicide rates. I mean, and these are now being related to inflammation in our bodies rather than psychologically inherent problems. You know, and then we're a country that allows GMO inflammatory foods and poisonous foods, where other countries make it illegal. These are the things you have to realize to be a good doctor. That is lacking. So understanding what goes in our bodies is fundamental. And then understanding how we can get it out is an excellent way of treatment. So someone who has a heart attack, you better believe they're going to be on blood thinners. Of course. Well, my job is to try to prevent that from even happening for people who care enough. You know, and we have genetics now to see in their 40s who would have a heart attack. Okay, and we can actually prevent that. Help to do that.
So if you would start a detox process with somebody, but because, well, I know that what you work on, often first people come in stressed. So first you do some breathing techniques to calm down, right? Like parasympathetic activating means becoming calmer before you start out at all, right?
You can tell when a person is down, as we were talking about, that that's the thing that they need to work on. And then
so if you notice a certain toxin, because you measure that too, right? You basically
measure that right in the urine. This is, as I mentioned, conventional medical testing, but it's not done enough.
No.
Again, due to that time restraint we keep talking about, the disincentives, the whole healthcare system in this country, which everyone in the world and leading edge countries asks, why is your country so messed up? You know, and that's because we need a paradigm shift. We need a paradigm shift completely. We need to incorporate nutrition and lifestyle. And when you specialize in these areas like I have, it's unbelievable how little you need specialists, when we still do, of course, but so much less.
So if I would come in your office and I say, like, I'm depressed, I tried everything, nothing is working, you test me, you test my urine and maybe also DNA test or whatever, and then you're gonna give me like supplements. Is that the way to detox, or how would you describe, like in a few sentences, your the way like a program for somebody to detox?
Okay, so based on the Journal of Clinical, Environmental Toxicology, where it talks about how skin is our biggest organ, right? The largest organ. Sorry for that.
That's right. This is better.
Skin is the largest organ, and actually has been shown to remove heavy metals and toxins from our body as much, and if not more, than kidneys, meaning our urine peeing them out.
Yeah.
Which we knew which is one of the fundamental. So knowing that, a lot of studies have been done by cardiologists, wellness people like you and Wim, who started, the movements. towards seeing if this can help with health conditions. And it's unbelievable what they found. 200,000+ people in a study in Sweden was done, or I'm sorry, Finland, about sauna use. And sauna used 3 times a week showed that compared to, these are patient studies, but compared to other people who did not do it, died less, died later, and had less cognitive problems like dementia, which we know are oftentimes inflammatory and toxin related.
Yeah.
So there's skin. The second part would be, of course, urine, like we talked about. So maintaining good hydration, making sure you have enough zinc in your body, because zinc actually is a metal that we need, an essential metal that competes with other metals.
Yeah.
Allow it to kind of reabsorb and get accumulated in the kidneys. We've seen in the Journal of Nutrition that there's an inverse relationship with low, like people deficient in zinc and higher cadmium in the kidneys.
Of course.
Makes sense, right?
I mean,
just like it makes sense knowing, it makes sense knowing that sauna, is if we lose these metals from the skin, that this would help. And then, of course, bowel movements. If you're not having a bowel movement at least once per day, you should probably talk to a doctor about why.
Yeah.
We look at
going to the toilet, right? Yeah.
Right. That's number 2. And if you don't do that, you're not detoxing from the body.
Yeah.
And that's just fundamentally important. And if you don't, that's, again, I tell people go see a physician, a gastroenterologist, or somebody who can at least do a gut microbiome assessment, because the bacteria in our gut is important in that case. And you want to see that it's functioning, and you can change that with certain strains of probiotics or antibiotics or more clean methods if you want. And that's what I was trying to do.
Let me get into that, but first I want to summarize what you say. So basically, if a person comes into your office, you're gonna test them, and then you make them sweat. You make them drink water. You give some supplements where you see, like, if there's an overload of cadmium, then and you see a deficiency of zinc, then you give them like zinc vitamins to get over that discrepancy, right?
Yeah, I would say the first thing we do is listen. We just like to see, and if somebody says that they've been exposed to an industry or a highway or something, like based on their job, for example, or where they live, we start to think already in terms of those toxins. And we can test a simple urine or blood test if they have it, and get them on a comprehensive detox plan with fasting mimicking diets, with sauna use, hydration, right? And even other supplements, like you said, zinc and others that can really help the liver and kidney excrete them.
Man, I'm so happy that doctors like you exist. It's funny that if you go in, I want to go into the bowel movement after this, but if you go to a doctor here in Holland or in Amsterdam where I live, and you would say, like, I'm depressed, they would say, like, okay, what's your lifestyle like? Like,
wonderful.
Depressed at work, relationship, do you work out? Do you have any practice? Like, do you actually drink normal water? And then they would go into, like subscribing a recipe for pills. And still, I believe 1 million out of 16 million people is on antidepressant medicine.
I love hearing that.
But anyway,
you're not alone. Germany as well. In fact,
it's like the Northern Europe, and then Scandinavia is even better because they do not only sauna but cold training as well.
Which we can get into.
I think that will be for another video, because let's talk about the gut.
Yeah.
Because this is the way I understand it. We have our autonomic nerve system is at that part that is inside our body and difficult to control, other than medicine, like a lot of doctors would say. It's where the blood vessels contract and widen, your oxygen uptake, your CO2 release, your hormonal release, your inflammation, all that stuff is autonomic, right? Autonomic nerve system.
Yeah, just think of it as automatic, autonomic, totally. Automatic. You don't think of it.
And then if you look at the autonomic nerve system, it consists of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic, fight or flight, parasympathetic, rest and digest. And here we go. So if somebody is continuously stressed, always on, you have high levels of adrenaline. If adrenaline is released, then cortisol is released to get the adrenaline down. But if you keep on adding adrenaline, both the adrenaline and the cortisol is high, and you're basically living a stressed life that most of us do in a way, like that's just northern hemisphere countries, a white man's country, I would want to call it, but it's a bit weird maybe, but still. So if you're always in the sympathetic nerve system, like the parasympathetic is activating your gut. Yeah, so like after dinner dip, if you had like a good meal, you're a bit tired. This is where you go into parasympathetic because your bowels have to be active to process the food, digest the food. So this is what I understand, that if you are, it's a matter of time, basically. If you're really always in that sympathetic fight or flight, it's a matter of time where you will get gut problems simply because not enough blood is flowing there and there's not enough happening there. What's your say on this?
Well, that's very, very true, especially knowing that, as you mentioned, it's innervated or has nerves controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. So imagine your colon, which normally does this to digest, right? It moves, but it becomes paralyzed because of your sympathetic is always dominant. So it can't. You become like a lead pipe. You get feelings of bowel, like the food won't go down. I haven't had a bowel movement. I've constipated. But that's not all. You've heard of leaky gut, or intestinal permeability is the medical term for that, where now you're accumulating all these toxins and food waste products in the bowel that are causing microbiome disruptions. That's the ecosystem of organisms in the gut, which are building up in areas they're not supposed to. You have different bacteria in the upper GI as far as the lower GI tract in the colon. So now you have that, they're growing. You can get IBS, gas type symptoms, and all these inflammatory problems are just going to be managed in conventional care with a medication to control symptoms rather than the underlying problem a lot of times. And that's the thing, is I'd love to see it more where they're getting to the root cause, but that's precisely right. Your sympathetic nervous system can cause constipation, disruptions in that ecosystem called the microbiome. You're going to have constipation. You could even have diarrhea because it's constantly like sputtering or moving. We see that a lot. And these are different forms of, a lot of times, the similar etiologies or similar, causes of the same problems, or different problems, same cause. So you can do it also by not having stress lifestyle, for example, but you could just be eating the wrong things, right? Too much of one probiotic, we have high suspicions that can be a problem. There's not one probiotic treats one thing. There's multiple.
There's no black and white,
so
right?
Doctors who say that, again, it's very linear medicine, that they're not thinking properly, and you want to look at that. You can actually do tests, stool tests today, to look at the microbiome and see what your body needs, see how you're digesting food, etc. See what the underlying problem is. But if we already know through talking and listening to our patients, we know that the person is having a stressful time, let's try to help that and see if the other problems get better.
So if we would, sorry, go ahead.
Step by step. So it's a systems-based approach, not symptom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, step by step, and create a ritual that is actually working for you. So say I'm depressed because gut problems and depression, there's also a huge link there, right? That if your gut is not functioning well, you just said it actually, what is it? Endorphins and dopamine are made in the gut. So if this is not working properly, it's a matter of time you get depressed, basically.
Precisely. There's something called, many people have heard of this, and if you type it in on the internet today, you can see the gut is the second brain. Some people say it's the first brain.
Yeah.
Because that, like we talked about, there's a connection between the brain and the gut. We just talked about it, sympathetic and parasympathetic, which really controls it and manages digestion. So that balance, can also be harmed by inflammation that causes damage to the lining where serotonin and dopamine, these neurotransmitters, are formed, and they travel up to be used in the brain. And if you're not producing them, that's where a lot of anxiety and depression actually has its roots.
So, and this is a bit of, this is the way I understand it. But if we talk about inflammation, if we would be in the sympathetic, your lungs take up more oxygen, and you will get more oxygen in, and the ratio oxygen divided by CO2 goes up. You breathe, this is actually happening in the fight or flight, right? So in the fight or flight, we have less inflammation still, if we live in fight or flight all the time, you will get inflamed. Is this because it's much like, I always compare it to running. If I would be untrained and started to do like a super marathon and running like 50 miles, it's very unhealthy for my body, right? Well, if I have like a daily running exercise, which is maybe only 20 minutes, my body is getting used to that higher heartbeat. And after a few weeks, my heartbeat will actually be lower. So although my heartbeat goes up through running, it's not a bad thing. Yes, you're activating your sympathetic, but I put this under in like the box of healthy stress, basically.
Think about it like this: it's how many hours do you have per week, right? What is it? However many it is. How many are you running? It's like this much of a fraction of it, but it's setting the tone for the rest of it. Yeah. Exactly.
So, being too sympathetic, gut problems, a lack of happy hormones, if I may be simplistic, like endorphins, dopamine, whatever. How do we solve that? How do we go more to that parasympathetic? What is your say on that?
I love what you do. I think that's a great start. There's an approach that we do because it's systems-based. It's an organized approach to each patient. We see what they have. Let's say it's that stressed person you were talking about. I get them to download the Calm app. There's a reason why it's all over the place. It's a bestseller. It's got great reviews. Okay. Managing stress is crucial in our fast-paced society. So you start working on breathing stuff you can do at home. Managing stress. I even show them in the office that 4-7-8 breathing that Dr. Andrew Weil out of the University of Arizona's School of Medicine and my program enforces. And that type of breathing can really help control that sympathetic and allow the parasympathetic to come up. I do it before I'm stressed, before an interview, a talk, a paper, anything like that is when I use it. And then there are also supplements called adaptogens we could talk about another time if you wanted to elaborate, but they help balance out the immune system as well. The cortisol response as well, like ashwagandha or rhodiola, which have a lot of studies backing them. Safe, non-harmful, and well-studied. Well-studied in multiple case scenarios, showing the links of how they work. And by breaking down cortisol, allows people not to have the consequences of too high stress. So I use a twofold approach that way. And then I move on to the next system, which is the gut. And we do testing.
So twofold, it's 4-7-8 breathing. I use it actually to fall asleep if I can't sleep. It's an amazing, but it's activating your parasympathetic, right? It's not like running. It's more like walking quietly in the forest and take it really easy, basically slowing down.
Your breath to do either or, right? And you're
And what is the second then? So apart from breathing, basically you make
adaptogens, supplements that really can help break down cortisol. But knowing the right one is important. Getting the right supplement. You don't just go to CVS or Walgreens in this country and get them. Those are not standardized, not FDA regulated. They're actually probably harmful. They're loaded with crap and dyes, fillers, preservatives, on and on. So you want to make sure it's a good quality one. And usually an integrative medicine doctor can point you in the right direction if you're getting this evaluated anyway. You get the right stuff for your body, it works. And it really is a matter of training. Just like exercise training, health training is important too.
So basically, you help people change their life.
I help people change lifestyle with some medicine support as well. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, but say, is it possible to measure the adrenaline and the cortisol level in my blood? And if I would do 4-7-8 breathing, can you see that go down like almost instantly? Because that's the feeling that I have, that I can slow down my heartbeat from, I think it's now about 80. It would be like between 50 and 60 normally. And then after breathing, it's like 45 or something. Wonderful. I'm really calm.
The answer to your question is yes.
Oh, man.
That's it.
Can we use me as a test subject next time I come to Miami?
Well, the thing is, a blood test is only one spot in time. And functional medicine looks at, how your body is functioning. So it looks at over a course of time. So actually, we send a kit home to our patients to spit in where we can get salivary cortisol, which is even more accurate, and do it throughout the day. And we compare it to the normal salivary cortisol or stress hormone curve of people without,
normal people don't exist.
And then it's like, oh my God, we show them what's going on in your body, and then we can show them 6 weeks later the improvement.
So cool. So cool. You know, as you know, like I'm very fond of breathing techniques. I love the parasympathetic breathing techniques. Like I call it like 1-3 breathing, 1 in, 3 out. You know, if I breathe 10 counts in, I breathe 30 counts out, for example. Or box breathing, 4-4-4-4, 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out, hold out for 4. It's another one. And one of my favorites is exactly the one that you use, is 4-7-8 breathing. It's just amazing. But those breathing techniques, I put in like the box. That's what our minds do, you know, put it in the box. I put this in the box of parasympathetic breathing techniques, calming down breathing techniques. Well, a breathing technique where I'm fond of is like the Wim Hof method, but there's more techniques. We choose breathing in a more rapid and deeper pace, which is actually activating the sympathetic or the fight or flight, but only temporarily. So it's like healthy stress, much like going for a 20-minute run, you know, like same idea. And then a breath hold where, you know, you activate the parasympathetic, but especially because you've just been activating your sympathetic, and then you like fall into your meditative state, rest and digest, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And I use both, you know, like I use parasympathetic breathing techniques whenever I feel stressed for some reason, or just to play around with. When I get annoyed at the airport, especially if people are walking in front of me and they're slow, it's really like that hyperactive stock market boy in me comes to the surface, like, come on, you know. I'm like, okay, you're being impatient. And then I take like 8 steps breathing in and 16 steps breathing out. So I play with those parasympathetic a lot, and I use it when I can't sleep. You know, I've been Mr. Insomnia for like half of my life, and now I'm okay with this actually. But then the breathing techniques, like for example, Wim Hof method, breathing phase, breath phase, is like, it's more like where parasympathetic breathing techniques is taking a very slow walk in the park. A breathing technique like the Wim Hof method is more like interval training, you know, running it for 2 minutes, walking for 2 minutes, like that. And what I understand from these breathing techniques, and it's still called the hypothesis, so there's no like real clinical evidence here yet, but I think that's pretty easy to obtain, honestly. But that if I'm like very parasympathetic, in other words, nothing can come out of my hand, you know, like write that email today, and I can't because I'm procrastinating the whole day. It's not cool to be only parasympathetic, but less people suffer from that. So that's why we don't talk about it. But either wherever I am, if I'm very parasympathetic, I just woke up, I notice there's no coffee, and I have a talk in 1 hour or something, I can use these breathing techniques to get out of parasympathetic and balance it out and be in the middle of sympathetic, parasympathetic 50-50. So it gives you more energy.
Yes.
Well, if I'm stressed, I'm like, say, 80% sympathetic, 20% parasympathetic, I do this breathing technique and it moves to 50-50. So I calm down. Do you think it works like that?
I know it works like that because that's we have the documentation, evidence, and studies to prove that slowing the breathing reduces cortisol tremendously, and cortisol is associated with almost every chronic disease problem, including your friends who had the heart attack at 45. You know.
So, but then if I'm breathing deeper and faster, I activate the sympathetic, and actually I'm not sure if cortisol is already released, but say adrenaline and cortisol is released. A lot of people, you know, like react on my YouTube videos like, no, that's unhealthy, because why would you add stress to your system? But it's healthy stress. It's much like interval running, where you build stamina, but then you build stamina of like, say, your respiratory system.
Right. And I think anybody who does,
sorry?
Yeah, anybody who has a medical condition, fear, unconscious, should always have it supervised and confirmed with a doctor that they're in good enough shape to do it. But for the young and healthy and people who are affected by lifestyle stressors, things like that, that are really going to set the tone for their health for the rest of their life, hence why how important this field that I'm in is. These stunners, as I call them, you know, cold exposure, rapid breathing, you're first off hyperoxygenating yourself. which is excellent for people who are shallow, superficial breathing. And that builds acidosis when they're like that. So you're actually causing alkalosis, the opposite, too much base. But as long as you stop it and use your body, your lungs to regulate it, that balances out. Not to mention your kidneys, as long as they're functioning properly, which most people they are, again, going back to being cleared by a doctor. In that case, you're balancing acid base quite well. You're shifting it only temporarily for a greater benefit from the viewpoint that I have. I'd love to see more data on this long term, because there isn't.
No.
But short term, again, hyperoxygenation, clarity, cognition in the brain are very helpful. And again, it really depends when you use them. If you're in already a relaxed parasympathetic state and you want to beef up your cognition, you want to train the body to sustain cold and things like that, like we were talking about, that's where that would have a role. But if people are overly, if I said this correctly, overly stressed, you want to relax the stress response by doing 4-7-8. And I do that in my office. It's done integrated medicine in every university medical center in the country. Yeah. And people who don't do this are a little bit behind. That's where we're at.
Yeah, but that is where you triggered me completely when you told me, like, whenever somebody goes in, it's like 8 out of 10 times, first 4-7-8 breathing for like 2 minutes, and people already have more clarity, because this is the way I see it. If this is parasympathetic, sympathetic, 50-50, it's not being sympathetic is always bad, because like if we're sympathetic, our brain gets more oxygen, we can see better, our memory becomes better, so our focus, if we have to work hard, we're like in that part. Yeah. But if you're overly stressed, then it goes too fast and you're like, you're going to give up everything.
And chronic stress kills the immune system by the same way that you were talking about. Acutely, you're stimulating, all these things, you're lowering the immune system. That's exactly what it's doing. You're not going to get sick in 5 minutes. The point is that by doing that, it's suppressing inflammation. That's what your immune system does. It's suppressing inflammation. That's where it's really helpful. And then over time, we're talking about, like, if you had chronic stressors multiple times a day, not from breathing techniques, but many hours per day, we see that it degrades the brain, the hippocampus of the brain. Cortisol does that, and that's where memories are formed. It leads to obesity, sleep issues, anxiety.
It's all connected. It's beautiful. So the key word you just said is chronic. So temporal stress is actually healthy.
Yes, if needed, it's necessary.
It's
to fight or flight, right? To run away from someone with a gun, but also, like cognition, to see better in certain scenarios.
Yeah, but also like these Facebook wisdoms, we need resistance to grow. You're like, yeah, right. But it all falls into place, like in a talk like this, because that resistance stress is what you need. Like muscle building is done through putting stress on your muscles. So it's just that
is tearing muscles a great idea? It's kind of the same principle.
Yeah. So like healthy stress, or a little bit of stress, or temporal stress, is actually healthy. So it's like intensity, relaxation, then it becomes healthy. But and
you're balancing, modulating the autonomic nervous system.
And your body is also, because like for another just an example, if we go into sympathetic, our blood vessels contract. What I understand in the gut, so our internal organs get less blood, and it moves to your arms and your legs because you have to fight or flight, and to your brain, because you have to think clearly. This is why
why are joggers not in great shape? That do long marathons. You're thinking, wait, they're in great shape. Oh, are they?
No.
Next time you want to look at, see what a long distance runner, someone who trains that many hours per day, talk about chronic stressors, that decreased circulation to the gut, as you were saying, Tim, cause bloody stools or bowel movements full of blood, because they're breaking down the tissue. They're not going to absorb well. And that's why a lot of times that they can't get enough amino acids, because they've damaged that tissue from chronic stress. So it doesn't just come in the form of fear or emotional or lack of sleep, but also physical. Yeah. So balance is key.
Balance is key. And to get a bit outside of our comfort zone is where we grow. This is also true. But if you're like too parasympathetic, basically you're like...
Exactly. Nothing good there either, because there's less heart rate variability. You're at a low heart rate. You're not stimulating yourself. And low heart rate variability is associated with mortality or early death. Yeah. So we have this.
Yeah. And too
And
much
for
stress
next,
chronically is also, of course, unhealthy, which for all the reasons we just talked about. Really cool.
and for the next talk, we'll discuss, I think, a little more on the other topics of fat reduction and cold training for that, as well as all the other benefits.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so let's finish this call. Dr. Elliot Dinetz, you're the man. I love you. Already did before this talk. And we're going to make another video about losing weight, how that actually works. The I'm still watching a video of the mathematics of losing weight, where, the secret is, but we're going to talk about this next time. Do we leave it in the toilet? Do we sweat it out? Or do we breathe it out? More than 80% is just breathe it out. So if you lose weight, you leave it in the air. How cool is that? But listen, that's for next time. So let's finish off this video. If you have any last words, like not of your life, but to the people that are watching this.
Sure. We do consultations, myself personally, with people all over the world regarding, lifestyle management, which I love doing. So it's not big. And then, of course, in person for the people in Miami or people who fly in, we analyze everything from their saliva, stool, blood, and we put together a longevity program for them based on their metabolism, hormones, and everything.
You're in the Miami district, in Florida, so people can come to you. But if somebody would live in Brazil and say, like, I want to work with this doctor, could you actually work on a distance? If you send them,
I have about 20% of my patients from Latin America, so yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because I'm in Miami, I think that was the real force there. But yeah, what they do is we start with telemedicine, which I've gotten into ever since the COVID scenario. And you can see the link in bio right under my Instagram profile at Dr. Dinetz, Drdinetz. And then they can click there and you can schedule, and then we see what's needed. Sometimes it's one visit, sometimes it would be more complicated, and we take it from there.
So Instagram is Dr. Dinetz, is Drdinetz. Website, same, drdinetz.com.
Elliot Dinetz, ElliotDinetz.com.
I will put it in the description.
ELLIOT.
I will put it in the description so people can find you. Okay, thanks. Wonderful. Thanks a lot. I'm going to press the stop recording now. Peace, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.